Today, I have the opportunity to present a conversation I had with Dr. Jeff Williamson. Jeff and I met after he was on the judge panel for an entrepreneurship competition that I presented in. I got second place.
Always remember, if you ain't first, you're last.
Jeff is an executive coach and Strengths Evangelist, while also working as a graduate professor and executive director for Olivet Nazarene University. Jeff decided to take the plunge back in 2013 and start his own coaching business, and has worked with over 750 individuals across dozens of organizations since then. We talked about making time for your ambitions, doing work that you enjoy, the mindset of a successful entrepreneur, and the power of sharing and gratitude. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Jeff. I know what you've been up to, but for the sake of everybody watching, why don't you tell us a little bit more about it?
Sure. Now, there's a lot, as you know, but I can talk about different aspects of, my work with executive coaching, with some learning and development training kinds of things for companies, nonprofits, etc., along those lines. So maybe that's a good place to start?
Yeah, sure.
Sure. So, kind of the background off the top is I've always seen that one of the best things about me is my ability to provide healthy input in others' lives. So even if you go back to a long time ago when I was your age, I was actually coaching college baseball. And so even then I was a coach. So I think since then I've always thought of myself as a coach. And so that has always had a positive vibe for me. So, over the years, whether it was in the context of teaching a university class or advising students or just meeting up for coffee, in a student center and that kind of thing, that's always been the time that I love the most out of my day. And so, a few years ago with the teaching and training and kinds of things that particularly I've done with StrengthsFinder, which we'll probably talk about that, I had more and more opportunities to go to a company, go to an organization or a ministry, and they'd ask me to help them with strategic planning, to help them with change management, those kind of things. And so there was enough frequency of that I thought, how much could I do this if I really was intentional, right? How much could I help people or grow my influence if I actually created a business? I think a lot of people do that, right? They're like, well, I do this thing and I really love it, and if I could monetize it somehow, that would be terrific. And so in some ways that's what I've done is a couple of years ago, I actually incorporated a business and developed the plan and all the the metrics and things that you do if you're trying to do it right anyway. And so that's kind of where I started.
Okay, so it started out as like just impromptu kind of things.
Yeah, in some ways it was informal. I've taught different areas in higher ed for 20 plus years, and so sometimes people that maybe had a organizational communication class or a leadership class maybe would call me up after the class and say, hey, I really liked what we did with StrengthsFinder. Do you ever go out and do that training for clients or companies? And early on, the honest answer was no. I'm like, well, I'd love to do that. What do you have in mind? And so it would grow, and then we all know word of mouth, the best advertised in the world. And so people would say, hey, that was pretty good. And they'd tell somebody, and so on it would go.
There you go.
Yeah.
So StrengthsFinder was kind of the connection there.
Right. StrengthsFinder has been a part of my story going back to before 2000. The StrengthsFinder assessment was actually a new tool that was out there. I think 1998 maybe was the first public use of it when Gallup started making it available on a large scale. And that was why I got plugged in, because the time I was doing my doctoral program, and I was so fascinated with the scientific depth and impact of it that I ended up using it as a part of the study. I issued that to students and then did training with first-time college students. And, those experiences along the way, I was totally hooked. So I have used it in tons of different ways over the last 20 years since then.
So how do you, obviously you work here full-time at Olivet. This is office for Olivet.
Yeah.
So how does that work between balancing those two things?
Sure. One of the ways I describe that, in fact, it's off screen, so I should have had it so I could, hold it up and show it. But 5 or 6 years ago, one of the doctoral classes early on, for several years, I taught the first course in a doctoral program in leadership. And like that question, a lot of times, full-time teachers, administrators, business people, and they would say, even though they're enrolled in the class, they would say to me, Doc, I don't know how I'm going to do all this. There's just not enough time in the day. And I would always say, yeah, there is. There is. And they'd be like, I don't know. So eventually I came up with this talk called The Power of 168, which I've written about, because you've been kind enough to share that. But what I did was to really map out for them the 168 hours. We all get the same amount in a week. And so we really did kind of this 6th grade math equation, which is about where I live most of the time. But we laid out that 168. And so the answer to your question is, when I give, even in a long week, if I do 50 hours, if there's evening events and more time, but that still leaves 118 hours. And I won't go through the whole rhythm of it, but I can sleep 8 hours a night. I can give 45, 50 hours to my job. I can give quality time to my family. I can spend time in worship and reflection. There's still a lot of time left. What some of us get into trouble with is, that time gets spent on ESPN, guilty, Netflix, things that are okay, but things that don't build a business, things that don't build a life. And so I just like doing those things in what's left after work, family, worship, reflection, and so on. And so for me, when you love something like that, I don't want to use the cliche, but when you thoroughly enjoy that, that doesn't feel like work to me. It's joy. Passion and strengths always go together. And so a part of it is that the extra stuff that I do instead of watching Netflix or too much ESPN, that stuff energizes me because it's making an impact. It's helping other people. It's maximizing them, which is my number one strength, is maximizer. So it brings me joy, which gives me passion and energy to do that, and I don't even think about how much time I spend on that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not surprised that maximizing is your number one. That makes sense to me.
Yeah. If you need a cue, they can't see, but it's on the wall behind me, so there you go. Yeah.
But I think that's similar. I've been doing stuff like early in the morning and then on my commute on the way home because I don't think about it as work. I think about it as like, finally, I get to go home and spend 30 minutes on a train, and I'm going to plug into the hotspot and do this. Yeah. I'm also curious, like, what are your other fears or struggles with doing this? What are the things that either kept you back from doing it in the beginning or that maybe are keeping you from doing things now? I'm just curious about that.
Well, one is kind of a human vulnerability. You have these ideas and you're thinking, is this a really dumb idea? Will anybody really have interest in this? Or do I have a skill set that people will find helpful, that they'd be willing to pay a fair price for? Well, like a lot of things, you don't really know till you just go for it. And like most people, it has experience where people go, man, that's really good. We paid a lot of money for somebody to do this at our company, and it wasn't this helpful. So you start thinking, oh, well, maybe I am up to this, and so that kind of helps move you forward. So probably for all of us, there's some self-doubt when we start some new adventure. It's kind of like a person says, I'm going to run a marathon, and they plaster it on their social media. Now everybody knows you're going to go for it. You can't hide. You can't kind of go, no, I'm not going to do that.
I'd say two of the fears also are monetary investment and then like public investment. Like when you make that, I mean, social capital, so to speak. Yeah. When you make that social capital investment and you say to everyone publicly, this is what I'm doing.
I'm gonna go for it.
Once you've made that kind of investment, you're more likely to just follow through because it's almost easier at that point. You've made your resistance harder to quit than it is to just continue.
And for me, at the after a period of thinking, I should do something, I should formalize, I should organize, I should really go for it. For me, that action step was, I'm going to pay a few $100, I'm going to register, create this S corporation, and become a real thing. Because then for me, it was like, okay, this is real. I have created an entity for the purpose of doing these kind of activities. I'm registered with the state. I have a taxpayer identification number. Got to do that. So for me, that was kind of the kickstart. Was like, okay, I've had all these, I think, good ideas and opportunities. Now it's a real thing.
Yeah.
So I need to deliver on that.
Something about just getting it out of your mind into the real world in some way.
It's not just some pipe dream. It's like, okay, I'm an S corporation now. What is that going to look like? What am I going to do with this?
Sure.
And that was the push I needed for myself.
Cool. So, spoken about some of the fears and whatever. What are some of the motivations that got you to the point where you wanted to do it? And what's carried you through?
Right. Yeah. Sure. Well, part of my journey my adult life has been. Because I'm a learner, going back to another strength, I am thrilled by new things. I'm thrilled by learning new things, learning how to do new things, learning how to help people in new ways. And so, that aspect of it has really helped me to where probably every 4 or 5 years professionally, even if I'm at the same place of employment and have the same job, behind my curtain in my reality, I'm reinventing myself in new and different ways. So it may be an add-on more than a reinvention, but I feel like if I don't do some creative growth, purposeful plan, I'm just going to be a big blob of nothingness. I mean, that's exaggeration, but for me, it's like I have to be doing new, creative, meaningful things to feel like I'm making a contribution in this world.
Yeah, I would say that's probably the biggest thing for me is the contribution, the need to be changing and growing. And I feel like a lot of that was satisfied through CPA exams and getting accredited and all this stuff. And
it's a validation.
Yeah, and also just what am I learning, and like, am I proving to myself that I am valuable?
Yeah.
If we want to go back to the self-doubt thing.
Yeah. That's real, man.
Yeah, so you have to prove that to yourself, and then at some point I kind of started thinking about, well, am I even doing something that I care about? And unfortunately, or fortunately,
sometimes not. Sometimes yes.
Yeah, but maybe the answer was more through that self-assessment. My answer was more no. I want to do something where I do feel like I'm contributing. So
you're in the process of reinventing yourself.
Yeah,
even now, today. Yeah,
which I think is probably a big driver towards a lot of people starting businesses or just going out, even if you're just doing a blog or just engaging in something you're interested in.
It's a common phrase, just put yourself out there. And it sounds easy to say that, but to really record something or write an article and put a shit out there, and thousands of people may or may not read it. Right. But when you get, when you get that 1 or 2 people initially that will send you a note and say, man, that really spoke to my heart, that really helped me today, then I'm just like, yes. Now I want to go do it 100 times over. Right. That's the other thing too. First you have to prove to yourself, I can do this. Then you put it out there and have to prove to other people, you have to at some point prove to other people that you're providing value, or else nobody's going to pay you. Right. But there's kind of this concept of like, do something that you really believe in and figure out how to monetize it later. And so how has that gone over the years? You know what, I mentioned earlier that strengths and passion always go together. Passion is almost impossible to fake, and if people have any discernment or any sense at all, they can see whether I'm going through the motions or if I love this stuff, right? And so when I'm doing those seminars or those group trainings or those coaching sessions or whatever it is, people can tell the lights are on and I'm really into this and I'm really enjoying that. And so sometimes after a session, somebody will say, you're just so passionate about this. I'm like, oh yeah, you could tell. And they're like, oh, can I tell? You know? And so to me, that's a key indicator. You know, when someone has an idea or they're thinking about, I'm going to start this business or I have this product that I really think will go, you know, if they're passionate and they just can't get it out of their mind, they can't get it out of their heart, I'd say, man, you got to explore that, because I believe that those passions and strengths and drawings that grip our hearts are things that they're there for a reason. You know, you fill the space on this earth that nobody else can. I do. And it's a struggle for some folks to just feel like that they're that meaningful to the world, that we need their contribution because there's nobody else like them.
Sure.
And I'm like, well, yeah, there's nobody else like you. That's the beauty of this creation, you know, and all of us, is that nobody is without something to contribute. They maybe just don't know it yet.
So let's talk about StrengthsFinders a little bit more. I think we've touched on how it hits people personally and
Sure.
personal coaching.
Right.
From the organizational standpoint, how does that play into
What does that
what
look
you're
like?
doing?
Kind of. Yeah. I was reading some stats not too long ago. 60% of the Fortune 500 companies are using StrengthsFinder. So it is a very robust assessment, and it's a widely accepted tool from a broader sense. In terms of ways that I've been able to use it to help people, I'll give you some different examples, three examples. In the last 3-4 months, I was able to do an all management leadership summit for a franchised company here in the Chicago region. That grew out of someone who I'd done a half-day seminar for, mentioning it to someone who is an owner in this franchise chain. That led to 4 lunch and learns with their team that led to this leadership summit in January. So it went from, you know, one person to now I've trained all their managers on their strengths individually. Then we did a second focus day on how do you build a strengths-based organization? What does that look like? What do strengths-based organizations do? How do they invest in their people? How do they grow them beyond taking the assessment and tapping their top 5 on the wall? Well, that's great, but if you just put it on the wall and never think about it, touch it, do anything with it again, it's probably like a foreign language that you don't use.
Sure.
But another example was a college up in Wisconsin had me in to do a day-long strengths seminar and then a second session on building a strength-based organization. Well, that was 100 employees, you know, all together on this one day, to where everyone that worked there, part-time, full-time, any role, we focused on strengths that day, and they've really soared with that since then. Of some of the things they're doing, the things that we talked about that day. So it can be as simple as, you know, like you and I talking about strengths, and then someone takes it to their workplace, and so I'll often do it a small department, 4 or 5 people, and then they tell somebody else, and then I'm doing a whole division, then I'm doing the whole company.
Sure.
So it will often play out that way.
I was going to say, so that brings up an interesting point with like your sales model basically sounds like word of mouth for the most part.
Largely, yeah. Although, as you would know, some folks would know who are connected with me on LinkedIn, is I use LinkedIn a lot to communicate when I've done a seminar, done a presentation, done a lunch and learn, whatever, because I've gotten business from simply doing that. There have been cases where someone had me in and we did a group photo smile together at the end of the day, and I posted it, and someone who knew someone in that group, you know, unbeknownst to me, emails them, calls them and says, how was this? And they're like, oh, he didn't stink, you know. And so that's led to me getting opportunities to do leadership development and training kinds of things for other companies. So yes, it's primarily that person talking to someone else that they know and saying, yeah, this was pretty good. But it's also been those times where I'm just putting it out there, and several thousand folks who are on my network see what I'm doing and say, hey, that might be good for our company.
Sure.
So that's an intentional action step of, you know, just making people available, make myself available to people and letting them know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
They'll often say, I think that'd be good for us to do. And of course, I'm like, well, sure, I can help you with that.
Of course I could, yeah.
Of course I could do that.
So where do you see this going?
Mm-hmm.
What are your intentions or goals for it?
Well, I want to see it grow. I think most people start a business, they want to see it grow. Having said that, I don't think I want to be some 100 employee beast in 5-10 years. But I do foresee as I'm able to grow and expand and stay in my lane, which is really the coaching, training development, learning development, leadership development. If I stay in my lane in that space, if I continue to see the momentum that I've had, I'm going to need other people to help me do those related things that are not my lane.
Sure.
So, to hire somebody to videotape events, to hire somebody to manage social media, to hire somebody to do some of those things. Mm-hmm. So I could see in time, as I have opportunity to influence people more significantly in my lane, then some of the important related things I would need to have other people working with me on those. So, maybe could I see a team of 5-6 people helping me do what I do down the road? Yeah, I could see that for sure.
Yeah, as that time fills out to the point where you don't want to do that.
Yeah. I don't want to I'm not at my best editing video.
Sure.
Or designing, slide decks. Mm-hmm. I can do it. It's okay, but it doesn't make my heart sing.
Yeah.
And that's been one of my phrases this year. People are like, man, why do you do all that stuff? And I said, because it makes my heart sing. It brings me joy. And I think it even brings other people joy sometimes. And so, there are things that are important that I love, that I want to have them done, that I don't want to do it myself, because that's not my lane.
Sure.
Yeah.
Another related topic to that, something else that I wanted to mention, at the beginning of when you decided, well, maybe I'll go do these assessments and create an LLC and all this, or an S Corp, I guess.
Yeah.
What were your visions at that point?
Yeah.
Or have they grown, or how has it changed?
I would say in quite a few ways, when I decided I'm going to organize, legalize, and do this, some of what I've been doing since then is stuff I envisioned then. I think where, and this is fun, is where, any of us that probably started a business have some, one of these days I want to, and we check that box off. Well, some of those have happened quicker than I thought they would, in terms of types of events and size of groups that I've been able to work with, and number of clients and some of those kind of things. So as those things that I thought might take a little longer are getting done, I'm modifying my goals up, of course, because I'm like, wow, I thought that might take me a few years to get to that, and I did that in my first year or two. Okay, well, I set my level too low. So now I'm going to put it here, because I really believe we figured out a way to accomplish most of the things that are really important to us. Kind of like that time thing we were talking about earlier. Of most people ultimately do what they want to with their time. I think what we think about, what we plan for, what we take into account, looking forward, hope, dreams, and visions. Well, we're not God or anything, but some things we can control and drive and create. And if we aren't thinking about it, believing in it, and planning for it, well, I can guarantee you it's not going to happen then.
Yeah, sure. So. Well, Jeff, I'll leave it open if you want to say anything else, or if there's anything else on your mind related to this, or also if you wanted to ask me any questions.
Sure,
I have no idea. Why not?
I could do both. Yeah, I could do both.
Right.
Actually, one of the things that came into my mind was really just, and this is probably because I'm an older dude and I'm over 50 and that kind of thing, but it's like, is really it's a cliche, seize the day, because for zillions of reasons, we never know the future. We never know who's going to be with us, who we're going to be around, what opportunities we're going to have. And last year I was on a trip with a friend of mine. I was actually sitting and watching him do a video recording for a podcast, and he was interviewing an exec of a terrific organization, and I was just sitting in the background taking it all in. And one of the questions that my friend asked him in the interview was related to priorities and how do you manage your time and that kind of thing. And then later on in the session, the host, the guy that I knew ahead of time, kind of looked, he goes, well, I know I want to be sensitive to your time, and I'll try to wrap this up as quick as I can. And at that, that person was just said, hey, let me tell you something. He said, and this was so good. He said, for a lot of years I've had this rule and this theme, and I stick to it, is that whoever I'm with at the moment is the most important person in the world. And so I just thought, oh, that's so good, because that keeps us where we are at this moment in time, to not be thinking, yeah, I'm talking to Jake, and yeah, I'm going to be here till this time, and then I got to do, it's like, then I'm not here. If I'm, so it's like, if I'm here right now having conversation, you're the most important person in the world right now, because we're here. So that's some 50-something reflections from make every day count, and be grateful for every day, because we never know what possibilities a day will hold. And I try to start my days out being grateful and thankful, and just be open to whatever comes my way.
And being present like that, what I would say, you're not just seizing your day, but you're seizing that moment. You're making the most of each moment throughout that.
Really try to. So how do you, I'll turn it around. So how do you do that?
How do I seize
How do you do, what are some ways that you try to go, you know what, I want to be all here right now. How do I make that happen?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, one thing for sure for me has been, and obviously I'm coming at this from the perspective of somebody who's trying to build a goal journal and like a gratitude journal.
Right.
So those things are very fresh on my mind.
Yeah.
So I think about, I want to accomplish these things. These are very important to me.
Yep.
And I get stuck with thinking, these are the sector 2 or quadrant 2.
Foundational kind of.
They're important, but not necessarily urgent.
Yeah.
And
that's a good place to live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do I make those things happen? And for me, the way that I seize the day and that I plan out things is I'm writing those things down. Like we were talking about with the just legalizing, making an S corp, making it real.
Yeah.
And so my focus is making it real, and then planning it out so that I know I have to do this today.
Yeah.
And if I don't do this today, I'm going to be pissed off.
Yeah.
I have to.
Because I know I have time if I will choose to do it.
Right. It all goes back to, this is the day that I have these 24 hours, and I decide what I'm going to do with them.
Yep.
And so, things can come up and whatever, and I can.
Trains get delayed.
I can shift things. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But at the end of the day, if I can just cross that thing off my list, and the small little step, little pebble in the pond of making the bridge, like building that.
Yeah.
So for me, being able to see that I'm making progress is the most like satisfying thing. That's where I feel like my day is like, okay, I can go to sleep now. Like I've done what I want to accomplish. And I would say also the other side of that, the gratitude part of the journal, which is what was on my mind, is not just seizing my day, but like trying to give back to other people's days as much as I can. Trying to, whether that's like not showing people how bored I am at work, but like being engaged and being active and helping people in ways that, even if you don't like the task that you have to do, for me at least, I really enjoy helping people.
Right.
And know that's something we share.
Right.
So if I step out and, okay, I'm going to look for those opportunities where I can help somebody today.
You'll find your joy in those.
Yeah. So, it doesn't really matter what it is exactly you're doing. If you get to listen to somebody wholeheartedly and explain something and help them through that, and then the gratitude, just giving thanks to people who have helped you do things. And when it's kind of really a mindset thing. If you just shift it, all of a sudden you're not so focused on what it is that you're accomplishing.
Well, in the essence, really what you described, I was thinking, is attitude. And I have to slap myself sometimes and remind this, but we choose our attitude. We can be angry, frustrated, or hopeful and encouraging to other people in the same situation. And that's something, even as a dad, I've tried to instill in my 3 children is that attitude is everything, and you choose your own attitude. You can't choose what happens, you can't choose what people say or they do, but the one thing you only lose by giving it away is the attitude that you choose. And
your mental framework,
yeah,
just your perspective,
right.
shifting.
Yeah, one of my favorite books we probably talked about, is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Yeah.
And in that book, he talks about, it's like there's this space between our circumstances and our response. And he said that the only freedom we have is the space between the stimulus and the response, and that's our attitude. And that anything that can never be taken away from us. We only give it away.